Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either sikkim365.com or baylorplus.com today. What's up, Baylor family? Welcome to Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. It's Thursday, November 21st, and before we get into our offensive keys of the game for Baylor against Houston, here is our visit with Baylor Associate Head Coach and Running Backs Coach Khenon Hall. Coach, hope you're doing well. Obviously, it's a great time to visit with you after the last 4 games. The running game has been on fire, over 1,000 yards on the ground, 14 touchdowns, 7 yards per carry, over 4 games. That's not 1 game, that's 4 games. I have the first question, not the only question, but the first question I have for you is how can your room be better in the last 2 games than it has been in the last 4 games?
Like I've preached to them, there's so much more that they can improve on, just their patience, their eyes, they're just the details of the position. I know the room is very competitive. They compete with each other. They do a great job of just, kind of just going off one another's energy. With Bryson and Dawson and Rich, they do a good job of holding each other accountable, staying close to each other, staying back to back. So I think the biggest thing how they improve is just keep on getting better and understanding that they haven't arrived yet. They got so much more work to do. They got so much more improving to do. I think they can be even better just when they get more on their details of the run game and the scheme and understanding and just being more students of the game and putting in more time in the film room and things like that. So, they do a good job of building their bond. They built a great bond, obviously, with the tight ends and with the offensive line. It starts up front. It starts with them. As if you got a close-knit room, close-knit coaching staff, you can do wonders if everybody, no one wants the credit, so we're big time, us and we program. So those guys, they do a good job of just leaning on that O-line and leaning on those tight ends. And obviously Sora do a good job of adding his part into the run game as well. So it takes a unit, it takes a village to do what we're doing,
This offseason, Coach, it felt like there was a lot of excitement building about Bryson Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people on the outside, maybe didn't know what to expect, right? Because he's still a young guy. But what have you seen from Bryson? It just feels like he's taken this big step forward and really has turned into just a very complete running back.
I just think it's more his approach, his mindset. I think when I got in, he was still, he's a freshman and, he came to me and just said, I want to be the best, and all those guys said that, and they all strive to do it, but, he just brings a different edge and he just brings a sense of purpose and sense of accountability and just trying to be the best. He shows up every day. He's the same guy every day. He continues to try to learn and be a student of the game. So I think when I got here and just how he approached the game and he wanted to be consistent, he wanted to be a leader, and I think he's a natural leader. He's a guy that them O-line guys in the room want to follow. So, and I kind of, when I got here, obviously everyone told me how deep the room was, and I have a very strict grading system. And one thing it happens through the spring ball and through training camp, through fall camp, is Bryson Washington very consistent. He's very intelligent. He's very smart, and as you guys know, he's very hard. He's a hard-nosed downhill runner, and he's starting to show you guys that he's elusive. And I think that was the trait that everybody's wondering how fast he was. Could he make guys miss an open space, open field, or was he just a in between the tackles downhill guy? I think he's been able to show he's a well-rounded, all-around running back that can he's obviously a 3-down back.
Yeah, so they had the analytics and it showed he ran over 21 miles per hour. I do have a follow-up question to that, but were you surprised to see that 21 miles per hour from him?
Yes, I was very surprised. I think in practice, I think the highest he usually gets is 18.
Wow.
And through the summer, it's been like Dawson's the fastest in the room, and Dawson and Rich they'll go back and forward. And you look at Dawson sometimes being 6'2", 220 pounds. You're like, is he really that fast? And he really is. So it was surprising, but he's been getting better and better. With Bryson, it was about knee drive, so we've been developing that. We just the development of his entire game. Starts in the weight room with Coach Vic. Getting him right, and then in the training room, with Coach Tim down there. I think he just continued to grow. He's still a baby. He's still 19 years old. So for him, he's going to continue to get better and better as long as he can stay committed and dedicated to his craft.
So I know we can't talk about specific recruits, but when you look at your room, what is kind of the thing when you look around, because you haven't gone through a recruiting cycle at Baylor. What are you, wanting to add to this running back room that could take it to another level, just as far as intangibles or speed
Mhm.
or something like that?
Well, if you followed me over my career, even when I was at SMU, I had a deep room over there, and I recruited most of those guys. And I would like guys that bring something different to the table. Obviously Dawson is 6'2", 220, but he's a guy that's downhill, but he has a little foot speed. He's a little different than Bryson. Bryson's more downhill, hard nosed. And I think you don't want to say Dawson's a slasher kind of, but he got a little bit of slashing to him. And obviously Rich is a quick change the pace back. So, going forward, I think the guys, that we are bringing in are different. The guys are, obviously 6 footers, they 205 plus pounds. They got the top end speed where they're 10-5, 10-6 guys. But they both are different, one I think is a slasher downhill guy, and one just a really good athlete. I look for well-rounded guys, every down guys. And I don't care what size they are, as long as they can go in. They're tough, they're dependable, they're hard nosed. But you do want different backs in the room. So, going forward, we have the slasher, we have the thunder and lightning, so to speak. So going forward, just keep on adding speed and that change of pace back, a guy that you can got a little bit more wiggle in space. And I think these bigger guys that I am bringing in has some wiggle for their size. So it's been I think we've done a great job, starting with, Coach Hunt and that room over there in player development as identifying the type of guys we want to bring into this program. And I think we obviously hit gold on the guys that we will be potentially signing here on December the 4th.
Yeah, so this is your first year at Baylor, less than a year in Waco. But what has your time with Dave Aranda been like as a head coach? Obviously, this year a lot of pressure, but what
Mhm.
is he like to work for? And just as a kind of a defensive minded guy, you're on the offensive side of the ball. He's calling plays on defense and devoted to that time. Like, what is that dynamic like and being able to work with him?
I mean, it's been great. One thing about it, Coach Rand is an amazing leader. He hired guys to do your job. So he's not a micromanager. He's not looking over your shoulder. He's not, doing certain things like certain bosses. He's a guy he hired you to do a job. He's gonna allow you to do your job. He expect you to be the head coach of your room. He expect you to be the leader. He expect you to be what he hired you to be. So it's been great working for him. We show up every day. We got a great family atmosphere here. The people in the building is great, and I think he sets the tone. From the top down as far as the mindset and the culture here. Just as the family environment, and just everybody staying together, and just obviously, like I said earlier, it's just the us versus us and we versus the I and me. So he does a great job of leading. Obviously he's in Coach Aranda mode right now, defense coordinator, so the mastermind of
Yeah.
the defense. So on a day-to-day basis, obviously we have staff meetings and stuff, but obviously he's more dedicated to the defense right now. But when our encounters are great, he knows, you know, what we bring to the table on the offense, and the dedication we have and the work that we have. So he just allows you to be yourself. He allows you to go out and get these guys right. So I think he's a great leader, man. He's a great man as well. So he did a good job with us.
When you decide to come to Baylor this offseason, what were some of the big reasons that you decided to make that move from SMU?
The biggest reason was Coach Aranda. Just working for a guy like that, his reputation of how he is, family oriented, how he is such a great leader, and the wisdom and how smart he is and how intelligent he is. Having aspirations of one day being a head coach and being a minority as well. So just being able to learn from him and grow and mature. From him. But the biggest thing was coming here to learn from Coach Aranda and to help build Baylor back to what Baylor was, and just, understanding that Baylor brand, growing up in the DFW, going to South Oak Cliff High School, go Bears, hey, playoffs, go Bears, go get it. Growing up in the Metroplex, Baylor was always a big brand in Dallas, So a couple of my teammates, our high school mates, went to Baylor. Kevin Rogers and Bobo played basketball here. So for me, I've always known about the brand and the culture here. And then when I came here, what sealed the deal was the people. You know, the people that coach have around these kids. He's done a great job putting the right people around this team and around these kids. And I thought that was amazing for me. It's a lot of people that they put the kid and the student athlete first. And I really love that. And like I said, it was coaching, obviously, the people you have in the program.
Yeah. So back to this current team. You've checked so many boxes in the last 4 weeks. You get bowl eligible, you beat TCU, you win a Big 12 game at home. So all these things are kind of accumulating. But how do you avoid having a letdown mentally after checking so many boxes? Now you're bowl eligible specifically, but how can this team make sure that it doesn't revert back to not being as mentally focused, not having as much dedication to get another win?
It starts at the top. Coach Aranda came in Sunday and he set the tone, and it's from the top down. We all understand what has been accomplished here, but that's not what we came here for. 6 wins is good, but we obviously, we want to do better. The kids want more. They just trying to create a new standard here, a new expectation here. And we talk about it all the time, the standard is the standard. And guys that stayed in the program could have left. The guys that came into the program that could have went somewhere else. Coaches that could have went anywhere somewhere else. We all came here for a reason because we believed in Coach Aranda and we believed in the culture that he's built here and the foundation that he built here. And we kind of had an understanding that we can be in this position and have the potential to win 8 games and go 9-4 in the bowl game. So the standard here is 1-0 mindset. So we as coaches and from Coach Miranda's leadership, we eliminate complacency and content from day one. Just how we set the tone, how we attack it as coaches. So it starts with us and then our leaders. Obviously, you have Sawyer and B. Wash and Jackie Marshall and you Matt Jones and Keaton Thomas. And Barrington and guys like that and Gavin Yates and Cam. Josh Cameron. So you got leaders on this team, and you got the leaders from the staff where we set the expectation and the standards extremely high, and they understand that this is not good enough. We have not arrived yet, and we have a lot more to accomplish. So we just keep our head down, stay focused, and continue to work. At the end of the day, that's what it's about, and we just got to make sure that these guys understand that it's 1-0 every day, 1-0 every rep, 1-0 every series. And if we have that mindset and continue to stack days, the outcome for Saturday is going to be very good for us.
Coach, you are recognized as a really good recruiter. You've been that way at all your stops that you've been at. But you've also done it over different kind of eras, right? Because this was before NIL and then now with NIL and transfer portal. What's been kind of the biggest shift and biggest difference you've seen as far as your recruiting perspective between the two different time periods?
Um, I just say the biggest thing is you just have to be realistic. You have to be aware of the factors that you're encountering when you're dealing with the NIL period here. Obviously, for me and if anyone know me, it starts with the relationships I have in the DFW, the relationships I have in Texas. So everything, for as me recruiting base, is built around relationships. But obviously, you have this new nugget, whereas you have to be able to, have the resources. So that's been the biggest shift. It's just regardless, you got to have the great relationships, but you also have to have the resources. The relationships get you to the table, the relationships get you in the door, but obviously the resources are close the deal. So that's been the biggest difference. Back 5 years ago, it was relationships, who who the champion is, and now it's just, you still got to know who those people are. You still got to build those relationships. But, rightfully so. I mean, these kids earned it. They work hard, and you got the NIL factor. So that's been the thing, you have to have that resource. You have to go above and beyond. And you just got to continue to, you know, pour into them, and that's been our, the reason we've had success. Obviously, Baylor is an unbelievable institution, but, the resources and the relationships have kind of propelled us to the top.
Yeah. So, Coach, really appreciate your time today. Safe travels to Houston on Saturday, and good luck this weekend against the Cougars.
Thank you, guys. I hope you guys make it down there. It's going to be a fun game. As you know, they're a really good football team, and they're fighting for, postseason berth as well. So we got to make sure we locked in and focused and make sure we finish strong.
All right. Thanks, Coach. Have a good
Awesome.
one.
Thanks,
All right,
Coach.
sick one, guys.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. Hey, go Sock Bears. Let's go.
So great visit with Coach Hall there. Obviously, having the opportunity to visit with him. We haven't had that a ton. Really, if anyone for the media hasn't had that opportunity to do. So really cool to hear from him and everything that he had to discuss about the running backs room, the reasons he came to Baylor, which was really cool. I mean, he really stressed his relationship with Coach Aranda, which was cool. Basically the biggest reason he came there. So any final takeaways from what Coach Hall said and what we have to look forward to that from that room, and then obviously him as a associate head coach and running backs coach.
Right. I mean, I think that's the first place to start is just, his connection with Dave Aranda, the reason that he came here. I think that bodes well if you're kind of thinking, is Khenon Hall, going to be at Baylor for a long time. Well, I mean, he loves his head coach, he loves the head coach that he's working for. And so I think that that's a big plus right there. And obviously Keenan's made such a difference when you look at, recruiting and all the momentum they've gotten there and on social media and all that. So it was nice to hear from him a little bit about, just kind of what he views as, where Baylor is at and NIL and things like that, how the eras have been so different for him as an elite recruiter for a long time. So that was cool. And then obviously the running backs, right? They're playing really well. The run game's been phenomenal. And so hearing from him on that was really cool. Overall, great interview and really excited that we were able to have Khenon jump on and talk with us. It was awesome.
Yeah. So let's shift to offensive keys for today. Friday, tomorrow, we will do defensive keys, but following up on Coach Hall's interview, I think it's, this game is, we know that Houston's strength is their defense. And for Baylor right now, it's their offense. It's kind of the test of the two strengths. And if you look at this game on paper, I still feel like Baylor's has the advantage in that. I think that if you look at what Baylor does well offensively, it's going to be Baylor's toughest test, no doubt. But I think Baylor's offense is kind of at a different level comparatively to what Houston has faced. I think most comparatively, the offense to what Baylor runs and what Houston has faced is Kansas, and Kansas put up 42 points. I mean, in terms of run pass balance, the ability to run the football with high efficiency. Obviously, the game against Kansas State, but I think Baylor has the ability to do both. And so I'm really anxious to see how this one plays out because it's definitely Baylor's toughest test, really, since, BYU or Colorado. I think those are the two ones that we can refer most to in terms of this Houston defense. So to get us started, what's your first key to Baylor's offense in this game and ultimately coming away with the victory?
Run the football. I mean, we just talked to Kehnon Hall, and I know that Houston's got a top 6 run defense, but they're below West Virginia in the rushing yards in the Big 12. And so for me, it's like, well, they ran on West Virginia. Why shouldn't they be able to run against Houston? And it's really important. We talked about this number earlier in the week, but in games where teams run the football 29 or more times, they're 6-1 against Houston. In games where teams fail to reach that number, if they run for less than 29 carries, they are 0-3 against Houston. Yeah. That's the death trap. You can't get behind against this team. You have to find ways to stay ahead of the chains. You have to find ways to run the football, and you have to stay committed to running the football. Those are the biggest keys. Baylor's been pretty on brand with that, over the past, 4 games. They are running the football. They're making a concerted effort to do that. But if somehow they revert to what they were doing before the bye week, where at times they were giving up on the run game, which again, I don't see happening because I do think this team has changed a lot. But if they do that, then they could run into some problems. And I know Sawyer's been playing great, but in general, this team needs to run the football. That's been their bread and butter. That opens up a whole lot of things. You're going to force Houston to put more guys in the box, and then that's where you can create explosive plays against this defense that is good, but has given up some explosive plays.
Yeah, and I think what we know from this offense, we saw it against West Virginia, who presented, I would say, the toughest rushing defense that Baylor had faced, at least back to the Colorado game. We've seen what Iowa State's done. They've struggled. BYU struggled to an extent. So the best comparison was probably most recently the Colorado game. I think Tech did it decently, but not to the level that these two teams are. And what Baylor's able to do against West Virginia was they were through the quick pass game early, and then it allowed the middle of the field to open up for the run game. In rushing, I'm a big proponent of explosive rushing plays, explosive passing plays, defense versus offense. Houston does a much better job in preventing explosive passing. If you go back to their TCU game, they completely took that away from Joshua, and it was really impressive. Now, TCU wasn't running the football at that juncture, and it forced them into a lot of turnovers. That's what forced, to me, TCU to get away from just throwing it 45 times a game. They had to get Savion Williams involved, and they lost that game ultimately. But then they flipped it a little bit. Now they're running the ball better. But in terms of passing explosive plays, this is where my first key comes in, and is still basically get explosive rushing plays on the ground, because you're not going to get a ton of them in the passing game. You might be able to get some if your rushing game gets going, but the first and foremost thing is find them in the rushing game. Houston ranks number 3 in allowing explosive passing plays, and they're still pretty good in allowing explosive rushing plays, but they're number 7. Baylor's rushing XPR is lower, number 11 in the Big 12, but the last 4 games it's been through the roof. Like that it was really the weight of that. The lower ranking comes from the beginning of the season. Baylor has to continue to find explosive rushing plays, and I think that will happen. I think that Houston's not going to be able to commit to saying we're going to stop the run entirely, especially if they say, hey, here's the numbers, and then Baylor goes to the quick screen game. Now, Houston's secondary is pretty good. They can be physical. They have good safeties, but they're going to be challenged of what they have to cover up. So with playing off what your first key is, running the football, it really comes down to, if you can find explosion in the run game early, it's going to test those safeties, and it's going to open things up on the outside. And it's just all about balance. I mean, at the end of the day, if you have balance as an offense, you're going to be tough to beat. And Baylor right now has arguably the most balance in the league.
And that's a really good point. You know, you got to be able to create some explosives in the run game. And a big part of that is because Houston doesn't give up a lot of first downs. They're second in the conference in first downs allowed per game at 17.3. So what that tells you is, you know, teams are struggling to consistently move the chains against Houston. You do have to create some explosive plays. And like you said, more common it's been in the run game than in the pass game. But I still think there will be opportunities in this game to take some shots down the field, especially if you are running the football effectively. But yeah, that's a big one. You know, Houston, again, this is a solid defense. They're good at pretty much everything. The key is to wear them down throughout the game. And that's why you need to be able to run the football and not play from behind. So that's very key. I think for me, moving on to my next key here, 4th down conversions. So last week, a lot of Big 12 teams lost because they lost the 4th down conversion battle. Yeah. And it happened to West Virginia. They were, 2 of 5 on 4th down, I think?
And I think it started off as 0-3. I mean, had 3 basically turnover on downs early on in that game.
And it cost them the game. They weren't able to finish drives. And that gave Baylor a great opportunity to pull away in that game and eventually win that game. Houston is the worst 4th down defense in the Big 12, which is very interesting. And I think that's because they get in situations a lot where it's 4th and 1 or 4th and 2, and teams are aggressive. Also, I think it's the other side of that is I'm not so sure that opponent defenses respect their offense enough to be too worried about, you know, giving up a ton of points if they do go for it on 4th down. I think that's going to be the case with Baylor. I think Baylor's going to be aggressive on 4th downs, especially if it's 4th and short. I think they're going to be aggressive, try to win the physical battle, and then say, hey, you know, if we don't get this, we're going to have complementary football, and the defense is going to come out there and get a stop. So I find that to be really key. Baylor isn't great at 4th down conversions. I think they're in the middle of the pack, 8th 8th in the league. But Houston is the worst 4th down conversion defense in the league. So I expect Baylor to attack that, but that means Baylor's got to be efficient in attacking that. And so going, 1 for 4 could cause doom. But if you're able to go 3 of 4 or something along those lines, you're probably going to put yourself in a great spot to not just win this game, but potentially run away with this game.
Yeah, so Houston's averaging they are averaging in Big 12 play 12.6 points per game. There's been games where they scored more than that, obviously against TCU because of 4 turnovers, they scored more than that. But the risk reward of going for it on 4th down, if you have any type of field position, is great. You're basically saying the chances of Houston going and scoring right here are very small, and it's all about an analytics play. It's like Coach, I don't remember if it was Aranda or who it was, but they basically have it predetermined. Like, in this situation, are we going for it? Take the emotion out of it. They know where they are on the field. They know their opponent. And they say, yes, we are, or no, we're not. And that was actually my 3rd point for this game was 4th down. So you stole it from me. And what I want to add to that is 3rd downs. Baylor typically, it's interesting because I don't feel like they struggle on 3rd downs, but I think they play for 4th down so often. And they say, okay, it's 3rd and 8. Well, let's get 4 in the run game, and then we really set up 4th down. We either get to 4th and 1 and we go for it, or we get to 4th and 2, 4th and 3, and we have a decision to make. And Baylor has basically said we're 12th in the league in 3rd down rate. We're 8th in 4th down rate. Now, in the last few games, I think it's been higher than that. While flip that, 3rd downs for Houston, they're better on 3rd down defense versus 4th down defense. And so it's like strength versus weakness here. I just think it sets up better for Baylor for getting to 4th down. And that a lot of that stems back to they're already going to go for it, but I feel like this is a game where they're going to say Houston's going to have to do a lot to score more points than we do. And they're going to have to work a lot harder at it. And those 4th downs it's an easier decision in my mind to say, yes, we're going for it on 4th down. So if you're anywhere close to the 50-yard line, I think you're going for it. And then obviously if you're in Houston territory, you're going for it as well.
And I think one thing I want to add to that, Colt, is just this kind of shifting mindsets, because Baylor is 2nd in the league in how many times they've actually attempted a 4th down conversion as well, only behind West Virginia. So they've been very aggressive in that regard, which is nothing new for a Dave Aranda team. And I know he's not calling the offense, but over the past, since 2021, they have been aggressive going for it on 4th down, and that has continued this year. I will say this about Houston. They give up the highest percentage. Teams don't go for it a ton on 4th down, but the percentage is really high. I think a factor of that is if Baylor goes up, 17-0, then maybe you're punting, right? Because then you're in a situation where now you're sitting on a lead. And I think that's been a common theme for some of these teams as well. You get out to a lead and it's like, you know what? Let's make them drive 80 yards instead of 50 yards. And I think that could play a factor in how many times Baylor goes for it. But the percentage should be high due to just Houston at times, giving up these 4th down conversions at a high rate.
Yeah. I mean, and then on the flip side, Houston goes for it 3rd most. If you look just conference play only, Houston's going for it 19 times, and that's 3rd in the Big 12. And they're not converting them at a high rate. I think they're dead last. They're 16th in conversion rate on 4th down. So if you're playing that game, and Baylor's defensively, it's not that, which I shouldn't even talk about it. Baylor's not good defensively on 4th down. But I think a lot of those, you talk about late in the game against West Virginia, late in the game against Texas Tech, they were converting a lot of 4th downs so teams are going to go for it a lot against Baylor when they've been up in these last 4 games specifically, trying to get those opportunities. But Houston's not good in converting 4th downs. And obviously they're not good in a lot of areas on offense. We'll discuss that more on Friday. But yeah, I think that could be maybe that's the area where you say, does Baylor win by 2-3 scores if Baylor's converting 4th downs? Because if they're converting 4th downs, they're staying on the field. Houston's offense is already going to struggle enough. And if you're not giving them the ball to struggle or to potentially put up points, then that separation in the game is going to grow. And they want to protect the ball on offense. So they're not going to score a ton, but they are going to try to protect it. And if you're not giving them the opportunity to protect it, you're scoring points, then that can kind of snowball in Houston. Obviously good defense, but their offense struggles so much. If you're holding on to the ball and you're not allowing their strength to do what it needs to do, then you're in a really good position to win the game.
Absolutely. So I guess my next key to this game is kind of an interesting one because it's kind of gone up and down at times this year, but I'm going to go with slot receiver play. That's where I'm going to look at next. I think that On the outside, they might have some issues. Josh Cameron's been super reliable, but he might have a tough matchup this week on the outside, depending on how Houston utilizes their best cornerback. But I think in general, I think Baylor's going to have a lot of success across the middle of the field. And we saw it against West Virginia some. I think that Houston, their other safeties besides A.J. Halsey, can be attacked a little bit. And the linebackers specifically can be attacked. And so I think this could be a game where you see, a whole lot of Ashton Hawkins in the slot. I think you could see Monterey Baldwin create an explosive play from the slot like we've seen for a few weeks now. And then, of course, Michael Trigg. Those three guys in the slot, I think, are going to play key roles in this game, converting first downs, potentially creating explosive plays, and kind of being a safety blanket for this offense in this specific matchup. We know in the past game, Josh Cameron has been that safety blanket, but I think in this particular matchup, I think the slot receivers have a bit of an edge here, and I'm looking for Sawyer to continue to open up his game across the middle of the field and really attack the vulnerabilities in Houston's defense there.
Yeah, I haven't looked at that, but Baylor against West Virginia did a great job of that in comparison to really the entire season. I think West Virginia struggled in that area. If you look at their statistics leading up to the game, they were not good in the middle of the defense in the passing game. And they struggled in the passing game in general, but the middle of that defense was really soft. And that's, they're probably playing their safeties a little bit closer to the box just based on that style of defense. But Baylor took advantage of it. And I'm anxious to see if they can, what Houston does to counter that. But right now, Baylor's just showing the answers to so many things. And I think that's been the most impressive part is like, okay, you're going to take away this particular thing. Well, the run game is going to now take advantage of this. If you're going to play your safeties close to the box, we're going to take advantage of this. So if Houston comes out and says, we're not going to let you have the middle of the field, well, then what do you turn to? And then obviously you go back to the screen game, you go back to the, the rail shots up the sidelines. But in general, like, I don't know what Houston's game plan will be because I don't think the same team has done the same game plan twice against Baylor because nothing's really showed that you can do anything but base defense in the last 4 games at least. I think Houston's the better defense that they faced in all 4 of these games, but it's not to the level that's going to be able to completely suffocate their defense, especially with the run game going now. So that goes into my last point. Baylor does a really good job of not giving up tackles for loss. Let's go back to the running game. And obviously not giving up sacks. But Houston, on the other hand, does a really good job of getting tackles for loss. They're top 4 in the Big 12 in that number. I think if you can just avoid those, Spav's always been about not giving up negative plays, staying on path, and staying ahead of the chains. So if you can have a decent running game, or if it's only decent, is what I should say, that's fine. Just don't give up negative plays. If they're going to commit to do it, if you're going to run the ball with Bryson Washington and Dawson Pendergrass, don't lose yards. Your offensive line has to be steady. Don't get behind the chains, and then play into the hands of that secondary on the Houston side. So it's not anything abnormal. You want to stay ahead of the chains, but I think in this game in particular, because Houston does a good job of getting tackles for loss, you just want to avoid them.
Right, and most of it, like you said, is tackles for loss because they're 11th in the Big 12 in sacks. They only average 1.7 sacks per game. That's an important number as well. Baylor's been really good at not allowing sacks during this run too. And you mentioned the tackles for loss. So again, staying ahead of the chains, I think you're exactly right. You want to put yourself in good positions to move the football. Baylor's probably only going to need, a few scoring drives in this game till this game becomes a little bit out of reach for Houston. But that means you have to take advantage when you're given those opportunities, and you can't stall out a ton and have a bunch of 3 and outs. That's kind of what Houston wants. You have a 3 and out, then they hold the ball for 5-10 minutes, something in that range, and they're able to, grind the clock down and keep your offense off the field. So yeah, it's a very important one as well. I think Baylor matches up pretty well against that, especially when it comes to pass protection. But I'm curious in the run game. I'm a little curious about it. I feel like Baylor still holds the edge there, but Dave Aranda said he thinks this is the best defensive front they've played all year. So I guess it will be a challenge.
Yeah. Looking at Houston's offense before we get into it really more tomorrow, but they scored 30 against TCU, 14 against Kansas, 17 against Utah, which is probably the most impressive number that they've put up was the 17 points against Utah, 24 against Kansas State. And those are that was kind of you looked like they were finding their footing in those games, but then you get to Arizona, they only scored 3. Whatever's happened in those games, obviously they reverted back to the mean against Arizona. You just can't let them find it on offense. And we're going to talk more about the defense tomorrow, but I think you feel pretty good about Baylor's offense getting to that 24-point mark. And they haven't done that. They've only done that once against a Power 5, and that was against TCU when they gave up 30 points. They gave up 4 interceptions. TCU did in that game against Houston, 4 turnovers. So really anxious to see what Baylor does on offense, considering the opponent. And any final thoughts before we wrap this one up, and we'll get into the defensive keys tomorrow?
I think that this is a matchup where the offense can go out and just put this game completely away. And I think that's what makes it intriguing, is you get to a certain point and the game is pretty much over. Houston hasn't shown the ability to score much unless you're just going to turn the ball over a ton. So I think that makes it important for the offense. And then when we look to the defense tomorrow, the defense has an opportunity to put together a dominant performance. So you kind of have a couple different ends of the spectrum there, but it's going to be important for this offense to keep functioning at a very high level.
Yeah. All right, Baylor fans, that's going to do it for this episode of Inside Baylor Sports. Thanks to Associate Head Coach Kehnon Hall for joining us today. Have a great Thursday, and stick 'em Bears.